What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. Throughout the history of Overwatch so far, there's been quite a lot of buffs and nerfs to take place that have really shaped the game into what it is today pretty much every step of the way. And throughout time, there's been a couple buffs that have stood out more than others. And so today I wanted to take a look back into the Overwatch history books to rank our list for the top 5 biggest buffs of all time in Overwatch history. So if you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button and let's begin. At number 5. So Roadhog is pretty much everywhere it seems nowadays, especially in the current top tier, tank dominated competitive Overwatch scene. His health pool and his healing power are immense, and you can get some really amazing picks with him and just move in quickly and make some really offensive pushes. The real trick to Hog, of course, is going to be mastering his hook. You know, this one shot, hook him and kill him style ability can seriously change the fight in just a second and is crucial for many team comps on many maps in the current meta. Back in the beta of the game though, Roadhog's hook left a lot to be desired because the stun duration on it was actually a lot shorter. So before the patch, Roadhogs could hook their target, pull them in nice and close, and would have a less than consistent chance of actually killing the target before they got out of the way. And this was actually immensely frustrating and honestly made Roadhog almost completely unplayable. Essentially, if you add in the fact that latency takes a toll as well, then you kind of just go insane every time you land that crazy awesome hook, only to watch your opponent just walk away as if nothing happened. So this buff, although maybe a little bit seemingly minor, of increasing the stun duration on Roadhog's hook really enabled players to compensate for that latency between them and their hook target to give them just enough time to respond to every hook, every time, in every situation, making it super consistent and extremely reliable. And although this buff might not have seemed like all that much, nowadays he has a much greater chance to hook in a target, disable them, and kill them right on the spot, and as a result it's really shaped him into the powerhouse that he is today, despite the buff being a little bit before his time really. It's kind of funny to see how such a small or seemingly minor mechanics change had such a massive impact on the hero. And overall really goes to show how fast-paced Overwatch truly is as a game and how things like this can really make all the difference. At number 4, we have a change to Mercy that actually buffed quite a few aspects of her overall gameplay. Back in the beta, there were some pretty clunky issues with Mercy that really caused a lot of frustration and generated a lot of feedback from the community. So right out of the gate, you can see quite a few things that you maybe take for granted nowadays that weren't actually in place back then. Her blaster is definitely a really underused weapon, and a lot of the top tier Mercy players are going to be getting several kills in a match by just quickly switching to it, finishing off some low health targets, and getting back to the action. But before the patch, you had to manually reload the weapon just like any other, so sometimes in a pinch if you needed it, because you were being chased down and it was empty, you were done, and now it automatically reloads when it's not in use, so that's pretty convenient overall. Another one of the biggest annoyances of pre-awesomeness Mercy was her habit of getting stuck on a bunch of various objects in the game when she launched toward a friendly player using Guardian Angel. And Blizzard changed it to where Mercy would just barrel right through objects that were destructible, so she could worry about her teammates a lot more, and random plants and other random objects a lot less. The ability was also given the addition to cancel it mid-flight by pressing the button again, just in case you were too late and didn't want to continue the flight, only to end up right in the middle of the enemy team. And that specific change in particular really had a massive impact on Mercy's overall gameplay and really just feel and play style as a hero, and it really did a lot more than it would just appear. And they also lowered the cooldown and increased the range of Guardian Angel as well, because at the time before it never really felt just quite right. You know, you'd always feel like you should have locked onto the friendly player you were trying to heal, but it just barely didn't connect or didn't connect in time, and the overall quality of life improvements to the ability really made Mercy so much more playable at the time and set her up to dominate the meta for quite some time after this buff. Next up at number 3, it's the rework that took place to Torbjorn. So when the beta was just fresh and people were still starting to try out the game and learning everything, and once it had, developed a little bit, Torbjorn really kind of shone through as just a character that was, well, not so great, let's put it that way. It became pretty obvious pretty quickly that the way Torbjorn functioned mechanically just wasn't really working out, and Torbjorn players were constantly getting flamed by their teams, and overall just generally being pretty darn useless. So the biggest change that took place in this rework was to his scrap mechanic. So before you'd use what you had to build a turret, scavenge some more scrap off of dead enemies and allies, you'd build that turret to level 3 and then maybe use the excess scrap to throw out some armor from your teammates. With the new changes, the turret doesn't even take scrap in the first place. Instead, you kind of just wail on it with your hammer until it maxes out at level 2, and scrap was just used for armor packs at that point. And Torbjorn also instantly gets his level 3 turret using his ultimate, and this was a really awesome change because before, it was really difficult to get to the point where you could set up that turret to the point where it was powerful enough to have a major impact. Now Torbjorn gets to get his level 3 turret pretty much instantly whenever he wants, and as well, to get players out from behind the turret and into the fight, the dev team increased Torbjorn's rivet gun damage and his fire rate as well, and the weapon became really fun and satisfying to hop into a fight, pop some enemies, and dominate some fools. Now, it is fairly true that Torbjorn isn't exactly the most played hero nowadays, but that's because of a factor that isn't exactly considered when you just take a look at the power of this rework. And it's mainly because, well, immediately following after this rework, Torbjorn received some extremely significant nerfs that really took him down a notch, and as a result made him into the fairly mediocre spot that he is today. But at the front runner of this rework, I gotta say he was just insanely overpowered for a couple of weeks until he finally got nerfed. And next up at number 2, we're taking a look at the rework to D.Va. So after the release of Overwatch, we saw quite a few heroes get some serious work done to their kits actually. And before this patch, D.Va was pretty good at two things, getting in the enemy face for some hit and run damage, and using her defense matrix to one-shot mitigate ultimates. Maybe she'd get lucky and land a kill or two, but it was more of an area denial ability, and overall really left a lot to be desired in her kit overall, and she was definitely one of, if not the actual weakest hero in the entire game. And Blizzard decided to rework her defense matrix altogether and turn it into an ability that was much more dynamic and really just so much more useful for so much more than just knocking out some random enemy ultimates from time to time. Instead of having the ability be a button press with a really long cooldown, which came up only once every 10 seconds, you could now toggle the ability on or off and use it whenever you needed to. They swapped out the really long cooldown for a resource meter instead, and like a shorter cooldown kind of setup. Using Defense Matrix uses up a meteor on your screen, of course. You can hold it for up to 4 seconds, which is totally long enough to mitigate most projectiles, including quite a lot of ultimates. And as you hold the ability, the resource meter drops, and when it's empty, it takes time to refill again. And whenever you're done using the Defense Matrix and toggle it off, it just has a 1-second cooldown. So as a result, it changed into something that was so much more dynamic and just really practical compared to the older version of Defense Matrix. And secondly, they also made some changes to her ultimate. So originally, not long after she hit the live servers, her ultimate was pretty clear that it was going to be less of a terrifying death machine and a lot more of just a nuisance that people would casually dodge and then get right back into the action. And while this was potentially useful in some situations to keep people off of a point or to clear out an area, it was never really that serious or that big of a threat to worry about, and only really worked on some random occasions when your opponents maybe happened to not notice that you used your ultimate, or if you did some really clever or sneaky kind of trick. So the dev team decided to reduce the explosion delay by 1 entire second and made it so that the explosion would never kill the D.Va that actually cast the ability. And it became much more difficult to dodge at this point, producing terror and kills, while also removing the ability for D.Va to have to just sit back and completely leave the action for 5 or 10 seconds so that she wouldn't kill herself with her ultimate. And now, she's free to pick off some people with her pistol and get some enemies when they're distracted, and overall made her ultimate a much more powerful ability, and comboed with the defense matrix change, made her into a really dominant hero that has been in the meta ever since, really. And bringing home the #1 spot as the biggest buff to ever take place in Overwatch history so far, we have the major buff to Zenyatta. So Zenyatta was awesome in a lot of ways, some ways more than other back in the day, and in that same patch, they really fixed him up. You know, he was a combo of healing and debuffing the enemy while having some okay damage and maybe some decent fire rate and stuff, but he really suffered in terms of his actual weaknesses. He was super easy to pick off with his lack of mobility and ridiculously small health pool. A Widowmaker body shot would one-shot kill him, and overall left Zenyatta with a lot to be desired. You know, in the beginning he had 50 health and 100 shields, so he was just getting one-shot by all sorts of stuff really. So the dev team upped his shield amount to 150, bringing the entire health total to 200, which gave him so much more survivability. You know, 50 health really does such a big impact on a hero. They also changed his Orb of Harmony and Orb of Discord because they both used to have a really long travel time, which would cause a major lag when your healing or debuff would fire, and it wouldn't actually connect and cause the desired effect for a second or two, so quite often you'd throw your healing orb on a target and they'd be dead by the time your healing actually reached them. Same with the Orb of Discord too. The travel speed was quadrupled, so it became pretty much just an instant effect, which really increased Zen's overall healing and debuffing speed and just overall versatility and utility, which made him so much more useful and picked so much more often. Blizzard didn't really stop there, I gotta say, because they also made some changes to his ultimate to increase the overall healing and gave him some insane mobility on it, to the point where you could just press your Zenyatta ultimate and your teammates could just stand inside of a Reaper ultimate and wouldn't feel a thing almost. And overall, this change turned him from, well, the weakest hero or one of the weakest heroes Overwatch has ever seen, to potentially one of the most overpowered pieces of work that we've ever seen, really. And it's no surprise that he was immediately nerfed after this buff, and still does alright, I guess. Either way though, that's going to be it for our list today. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was definitely fun taking a look back at the history books of Overwatch, so definitely let us know which buff do you think maybe should have made the list that we didn't get a chance to cover, or perhaps let us know which buff you think was your favorite. Either way though, looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, definitely hit that like button, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.